Hi, welcome to the NAPE YouTube site. Today we are concentrating on information literacy. Sarah Pavey originally presented this video at the NAPE Summit 2023. Now NAPE has a library of videos, list below, from that summit that are available for the princely sum of £20. Please email the NAPE office for further details and a link to that YouTube library. Meanwhile, I thank Sarah again for this most useful presentation as a lead up to this year's conference 2024 on special educational needs and disabilities, being held at the University of Bedfordshire on Friday the 26th of April.
I'm Sarah Pavey and I work as an education consultant, but I've spent many years working in schools as a teacher librarian. I've worked with primary schools both here at home in the UK and specifically in England, and also with schools abroad as well. And I've also worked with classroom teachers. My background is in biochemistry and I did a master's degree in information science. I'm the school's representative on the information literacy group of the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals, known as CILIP. That's quite a mouthful, but it's the librarian's professional body. And I've got a real passion for media, information and digital literacy. When I was at university, they said to us that we're studying IT, and at the moment, it's the technology, that's the important part of the curriculum. It's where that we were developing all those gadgets that we use nowadays. But they said, in the future, there's going to come a time when information becomes the most important part of that curriculum. And I think that time is now. We certainly found out during the COVID epidemic how much we need to understand how information is used in our global society, and why we need to embed it into our curriculums and school life in order to protect our society for the future. So this presentation is going to explore some of those aspects, and I'm also going to give you some practical tips about how you could use this in your own teaching practice. As Mike said, if you're a subscriber, please feel free to post comments. It would be wonderful if we could start a conversation about these topics. So information literacy is a term that's bandied around by those in the information industry, but you might know it by a plethora of different names. So what I'd like to do is to just explain what I'm talking about by showing you the 2018 CILIP ILG definition of information literacy, which is generally adopted now around the world. So first of all, there are 5 areas in which it explores how information might affect society in the future. And this is something that I think you can explore with primary school children by dividing them into groups and looking at each of these aspects, inviting a conversation. And I've tailored this so that it's more suitable for a primary curriculum. So the first of these competencies and areas is looking at the area of education. And a way in which we can look at this with our students is to ask these sorts of questions within this. What would you do if you didn't know where the information that you got, whether it was trustworthy or not, whether maybe it was something that had been copied from somebody else's work and everybody just copied everything? If nobody asked any questions about what had been written, what would happen to society then? And what if all the information we read was just based on the person who wrote its ideas? These are questions that maybe younger students can relate to, and the sorts of things that we should be discussing when we talk about information literacy. The second competency area that we could look at is how information literacy impacts on health. Now, I don't think this is something that could be done with very vulnerable children or with very young children, because there is a certain danger element to introducing these concepts. But we could ask questions such as, what would happen if the parents didn't know when and where, how to give you information if you became sick? Or what if a parent didn't know how to contact a doctor or a GP or a nurse? What would happen to our life as global citizens under those circumstances? The next area that we're going to look at, which is everyday life, is probably something which is embedded within the curriculum you may teach, particularly through IT or PHSE or maybe citizenship. And this is all about keeping safe online, not sharing your password, not being ethical when you use the internet, and to be aware of cyberbullying. But when we look at these curricular aspects, as we'll see, they tend to be focused on personal safety. And maybe what we should be looking at is the impact on society if we continue this practice. So one of the things I'm going to be exploring later is looking at how we can model best practice under these circumstances. Now, this is an interesting aspect, the fourth one. This is about how information literacy is applied in the workplace. And maybe for our students who have no experience of the workplace yet, it might be better to consider the impact it would have on teachers who are in the workplace. What would happen if your teachers didn't understand the curriculum they were supposed to be teaching you? What impact would that have on your life? And therefore, what impact would it have on global society in the future? And another aspect of this is about copyright and people who've got a legitimate claim to being paid for something that they worked on. So what would happen if your teachers simply photocopied all the information you needed and scanned books so they never had to buy one in reality? How ethical would that be? And what impact would it have on society? Would anybody bother writing any books anymore? The final aspect focuses in on citizenship. And here we're looking about inclusivity and diversity. What would happen if you felt that you've been excluded from a conversation that was going on the internet because you were different in some way? Or what if you felt you couldn't comment on something because you thought that would expose you maybe to cyberbullying or some other threat? These are aspects that are very real to students today who live a lot of their lives online, even at primary school level. And how can we as teachers embed some of these questions into our curriculum? These are opening discussions, and you could use this as the basis of a first lesson, no matter what subject you were teaching. One of the problems we've got with the curriculum in England is that this type of teaching is not fully embedded within the structure of what we are supposed to teach. And the problem with that is that we have to find ways of getting it in there, but we don't want to have extra work to do, have to do extra planning. It should just be a natural progression. Now, one of the things that we can do is we can look at where it appears. And generally, as I've mentioned before, that's in PHSE or citizenship or the computing curriculum. But it does tend to be about personal safety. And we need to expand that. This is difficult, particularly at this time, because we all know that after COVID, there's considerable catch up to be done on an academic basis. And the emphasis now, a lot of it is placed on attaining reading skills. And this has maybe overshadowed some of these other global citizenship aspects. But if we look at European schools, they're taking a different approach. So in the European schools, they do take a different approach. And maybe this is because a lot of the curriculum that they follow is based on inquiry-based learning. So that means that they have more opportunity for project work than perhaps we do here in England. But they looked, when they were seeing how this kind of information could be embedded within the curriculum, they looked at the citizenship part of the curriculum, and they looked at the different approaches that the different countries took, and they came up with 3 particular strands. Either it's there as a cross-curricular theme that is around all subjects in the curriculum, but it's a shared responsibility amongst the teachers for that delivery. The second strand is where it still appears in other subjects, but it's discrete within those different subjects when it comes to teaching. And the third way is where it is a subject-specific curriculum, a topic of citizenship, and it is just taught within that curriculum strand. So let's have a look and see which countries adopt which approach. In this chart, it shows you which countries are producing more than one of these strands when it comes to teaching these kind of information literacy skills. And we can see here that the countries that are marked in the deep red are the ones that embed all 3 types of strategy to get this kind of information across. If we look at England specifically, we can see that only a single approach is taken. If you look at Scotland and Northern Ireland and Wales, you can see that more than one approach is taken, and that's because they have a slightly different curriculum to ours. Similarly, if we look at what they call informatics teaching, which is the part of the computing curriculum which deals with information literacy aspects, you can see here that the countries that are marked in deep blue on there are the ones, again, where it is a learning outcome that's included in other subjects. So within the curriculum, they have to demonstrate for each subject that they are embedding this kind of teaching and learning. The UK is not highlighted at all. That's because this information comes from 2022, when we've actually left the European Union, so it's not covered. But you can see again that it's countries such as France and Finland, and interestingly Turkey, that have embedded this kind of information not just through informatics but also their citizenship, and they are really the front runners when it comes to looking at media, digital and information literacy within the primary curriculum. It's not really surprising that France, for example, has had media and information literacy as a statutory subject in their curriculum, in their primary curriculum, since 1983. And this is, interestingly, despite the fact that there's a ban on mobile devices within French schools. So it's an interesting conundrum, but part of what they do is based upon a declaration that was made in Paris, which said the European Union said that the media education is a key to preserving the future of our democracies, because mastering information is an essential skill for future citizens. And we're talking about the future of our education here. So this is really important. We need to try and embed it within our own curricula, no matter how difficult that might be. So how can we do this? How can we do this specifically, maybe in England, where we have a very restrictive curriculum? Maybe if you're working in a school that adopts the International Baccalaureate, or you live abroad, then maybe you've got more flexibility within this. But it's a conundrum that I've always tried to address. And during lockdown, I wrote a book called Playing Games in the School Library. Although it says school library, this is equally applicable to the primary teacher as well. And the reason is that I actually collected case studies from around the world, many of places where the primary library is run by a teacher, and they came up with lots of ideas on how you could embed this kind of information. And these are just a few of them. Let's take what we started with, looking at that SILIP definition and having our discussions around what would happen if you didn't have these skills. An idea is that we could actually embed the UN Sustainable Goals into this same lesson by giving people a goal to look at and say, well, if you didn't have these skills, how would it affect the attainment of this goal? That's certainly something we could do with the older years, maybe 5 and 6 in primary. We could do something else, again, by adopting that slightly different take. And this is the picture there where you can see somebody looking at a keyboard. What if rather than just telling them to try and spot fake news or something like that, we adopted an approach that has been used more recently when addressing environmental concerns? It wasn't that long ago that we just were looking for examples of pollution, but now we're looking for ways in which we can address that and model good practice. Similarly, when we're looking at fake news, what if we allowed them to develop their own website and model best practice so that you could see what a website needed to contain in order to show it was authentic? If we turn it in this way, we are showing them the ethical approaches that they should be making. But maybe for younger ones, we can do something very simple, such as a spot the difference puzzle. This shows them how important it is to be exact when you're looking for information, to try and tease out those things that maybe you miss when you only read something once or you only look at a picture once. We can adopt things like a locked chest, a locked puzzle, which we're using their critical thinking, getting them to think out puzzles in order to get to the next level and maybe a reward at the end. We can look at technology such as the little cube that you can see there on your screen is called a merge cube, and you can make these for free on the internet, but it allows you to hold a 3D object in your hand while using a phone or 3D goggles, and you can hold it and move it around and manipulate it and ask questions about it. This embeds the curiosity aspect of information literacy and to ask questions to try and find out more. Two Truths and a Lie is about how we use questioning in order to discern the truth. And this is a simple game, party game, that I'm sure a lot of you may have played. Another resource that I developed was to look at posters, which involve all 4 aspects of creating a piece of work yourself. The first one sees if you can find the information. The second one decides whether it's information you want to use. The third in the series allows you to try and process it and put it together. And the fourth one is about going back over your work and reviewing it. It's all about information handling, all about information literacy. One of the things that I didn't want to do was to just give you a whole list of all the different hundreds of resources that are out there on how to teach information and media literacy. There are far too many. And as I said before, a lot of them tend to focus on personal safety. And I wanted this talk to be beyond that. We're at the next stage. We need to really engage students with how to handle information for its impact on our society of the future. We want to grow them as digital citizens. As part of this, one of the projects that I'm involved in is called Bridge. It's a European Union funded Erasmus project. And what we're doing is we're looking at primary schools across 6 countries, and we're trying to build a database of resources that we can use to teach media, information, and digital literacy. And these resources will be open source. They're not just digital, though. They're going to be picture books as well that we can use to arouse curiosity and questioning and to look at diversity and equality as well. So do have a look at the website. I did a series of pilot interviews, and one of them threw up a very interesting phenomenon, and that was how we can teach people to do that modelling we were talking about. How do we model best practice? And this particular teacher had used the Wakelet on the website of it's a Google product, and they were using Wakelet at a training centre to actually get the children to create a Wakelet that allowed them to explore all the different aspects of information, digital and media literacy. So that's a really nice tool to use, and it's free. So I'd encourage you to go and explore that. There are some other wonderful publications by the European Commission and the European Union as well. One of them is their action plan, which is running until 2027. And if you look at that document, it will take you to all the different considerations they've made and how they're going to embed that practice within their curriculums. How do they do it? Well, the final document that I want to show you there is this wonderful one from the eTwinning part of the European Union. And that actually shows you best practice. It gives you lots of links to all the sorts of information I've been talking about, not just the personal safety, but way, way beyond that. So I'd say explore these ideas, have a look at them. Information literacy presentations are no good unless you reference them properly and show you where to go. So here we've got a page of references with links on it, and feel free to visit any of these sites. They're all things I've talked about in this presentation. So I hope that you've really been able to take something away from this, something that you feel you can now go and put into practice in your own schools, or maybe just to explore a bit further, or maybe to have some CPD about it, or to just have a discussion within your school about how you can make it a whole school objective. I hope you've enjoyed my presentation, and I hope you continue to enjoy the other presentations at this most interesting conference. And thank you very much again to Mike for allowing me to speak.